Okay, guys, so we're going to carry on from where we got up to in class, the front end of Act 5, Scene 2. We dealt with the fairly dense, figuratively dense exchange between Othello and Desdemona, and that moment where Othello is kind of steeling himself for, the murder of Desdemona, but also the moral and ethical justification for that in his mind. Desdemona, I think her language here, we're starting from here, that Desdemona's lines I think reveal an understanding of this particular way of seeing Othello as being kind of limited by the way in which he views reality through the lens of these abstractions. So her lines, that death's unnatural that kills for loving. Obviously, the language that's being used here is kind of oxymoronic and paradoxical. Death's unnatural. I think you could call an oxymoron because really there is nothing more definitive of nature than some form of mortality. And so, therefore, seeing death itself as an unnatural phenomenon is one that emphasizes here, I think, the way in which Othello's behavior is beyond the bounds of what we would expect from conventional morality and shows the extent to which he has utilized intellectual abstractions in his justification of this particular action. Kills for loving, obviously, it's a kind of classic Shakespearean paradox. We think back to the prologue in Romeo and Juliet and the language that marks so very frequently his greatest speeches. I think here shows us, it's quite revealing of the specific nature of Othello's psychological and intellectual problem that you could see as his hamasha, his fatal flaw, is that really killing for loving is exactly what he's doing. He's at this moment in time he's killing Desdemona because he cannot contemplate her human reality. He cannot contemplate her as a fully realized individual human being. He can only make sense of her through the lens of abstract idealism, and that is a form of love. He is in love with that ideal, but he absolutely refuses to see her in the cold light of day as a normal human being. So this killing for loving, I think, the paradoxical nature of this phrase, I think, reveals the unique qualities of Othello's psyche that is leading him down the path of tragedy and immorality. So she says, "Alas, why gnaw you so your nether lips? Some bloody passion shakes your very frame. These are portents, but yet I hope they do not point on me." Now, what of course is really awful about this is the way in which this particular question that she asks him and the lines that follow show us the fulfillment of the racial stereotypes that he has been subjected to. And this is one of the great kind of social and ethical tragedies of Othello, as well as that the prejudice and the stereotypical categorization that that is imposed upon him by the sort of the Christian norms of Venice are precisely the way in which, or reflect precisely the way in which he ends up behaving. So here, this bloody passion that shakes your frame, we think of this as being more contradictory to that image of the cool, rational Othello, the man whom no passion could shake. Here he is fulfilling that particular racist stereotype from the person who has most at stake in ignoring that. So this, I think, goes to show that the veracity of this, the truthfulness, that he is actually at this, not of the stereotype, but of the way in which at least he is fulfilling the stereotype. He is behaving in exactly the way that racist Christian Venice saw, well, really anyone, non-white, but particularly Moors and black Africans as being these savage individuals that would be submissive to the passions and to their impulses, and here he is embodying this, and this is one of the great tragedies. But obviously this is part of Shakespeare's overall representation of race here, is that the way in which these abstract concepts that we use to define the distinctions between each other become self-fulfilling prophecies if they are in the hands of malicious individuals, that people are capable of maneuvering other individuals into the the categories that we create in order to justify our prejudices. So Othello continues, "Peace and be still. I will, so what's the matter? The handkerchief which I so loved and gave thee, thou gavest to Cassio." And Desdemona protests quite rightly at this, because this is not true. "No, by my life and soul, send for the man and ask him. Sweet soul, take heed of perjury, thou art on thy deathbed." So Desdemona, swears by her life and by her soul, and shows, her use of this Christian vocabulary to defend the legitimacy of her actions up to this point, and she's telling the truth. Othello addresses her, though, as a sweet soul, not as an individual again. He's so reluctant to acknowledge her as a fully realised, three-dimensional human being that he absolutely can't engage with the reality of the situation. And that's precisely what allows him to be manipulated. So when he addresses her as sweet soul, again, it's fragmenting her into components, and again, persisting with the more idealised of the two, soul over the body. But as well as that, it is again externalizing that morality that he knows his actions would be viewed through, an ethical kind of prism, and externalizing the judgment of that from himself. God will judge on the day of judgment. Take heed of perjury. So again, he shows that he is attempting to get her to understand the punishment that she will be subjected to, and is adopting that kind of godlike role. And again, uses abstractions to make sense of her behaviour. Perjury is using this kind of legal abstractions now in order to convince himself of the rationale for his murder. Thou art on thy deathbed. And this is both literal and metaphorical. He means this figuratively to a certain extent, but also she is quite literally on their marital bed, which, in the great symbolic irony of this final scene, becomes her tomb and his tomb. She says, "Aye, but not yet to die." She doesn't believe that this is occurring, and that's pretty normal, I think. And he disagrees. "Yes, presently you are about to die. You just don't know it yet. Therefore confess thee freely of thy sin." Again, he's giving her this strange opportunity to kind of purify her soul. And I think here, this constant need to extend this chance is more about his own guilt, I think, than really his interest in her own absolution from her sins. He says, "For to deny each article with oath," again he uses this legal vocabulary, "cannot remove nor choke the strong conception that I do groan withal." And there's something really important within this extended metaphor that he uses to describe his conviction in the truth of his assumptions. He's pregnant in this extended metaphor. He is pregnant with a conviction in her guilt, that her article with oath, her abiding by legal terminology and defending herself, can't remove or choke the conception, that strong conception that he groans with inside. So this gestatory extended metaphor, this is a metaphor almost of pregnancy, I think comes back to some of Iago's organic imagery about growth. The thing that he is pregnant with is effectively the suspicions that have been aroused by Iago. And remember his extended metaphor of, the gardener being the body's, the ability to control the impulses. Well, he is groaning with impulses of this nature that Iago has quite literally, the vocabulary used, he's planted within him. So that extended metaphor, I think, is very subtly echoed here in organic growth. "Then Lord have mercy on me," Desdemona responds, "I say amen." Again, he externalizes morality and judgment from himself by saying, "Well, let's hope so. I hope you're blessed." But Desdemona here addresses this particular issue. "And have you mercy too? I never did offend you in my life. Never loved Cassio, but with such general warranty of heaven as I might love. I never gave him token." So this is highly ambiguous. Obviously, her initial explanation of this particular line, the way that Desdemona intends it to come across, is that she only gave him the type of love that there is sacred permission for as a Christian to love, love thy neighbour. That's what she means, but with general warranty of heaven, almost makes this sound like she has universal permission to be promiscuous. And that I think, provokes Othello further, and spurs him on. So this linguistic misapprehension that they're subject to throughout this particular scene is actually something that drives the tragedy, and it's something that happens throughout the play. It's not limited to the final scene. It's more extensive elsewhere, actually. The way in which people can be taking pledges of chastity and of virtue, and they can be seen to be unreliable. And you think of the word honest and how it's used throughout this play in a way that's deliberately supposed to expose the weakness of language, particularly of abstract language, to accurately capture the nature of reality. And that, again, we've got it here. I never gave him token. That's her vision of reality, which is connected to reality, but of course, Othello's is completely different. But of course, from a sound classical reasoning perspective, Othello's claim, "By heaven, I saw my handkerchief in his hand," is not, irrefutable proof that she gave it to him. That he simply had it in her hand is contingent evidence. It's nothing that conclusively proves that she gave it to him. So we've got that huge sense of dramatic irony here, where the audience is fully aware of the way in which that Desdemona has acquired the handkerchief, and Othello has no idea. So we have this deliberate effect that the audience is part of, where vision itself is destabilized, and we are privy to the moments at which vision it proves to be unreliable. So Othello's vision of reality is completely in conflict with Desdemona's over the issue of the handkerchief, and that is what the handkerchief really symbolizes. Obviously, on one level, it symbolizes chastity and virginity and the pledge of marriage, but the way in which it means something slightly different to every character, I think, means that it becomes more than that, this kind of ocular symbol for the fundamentally unreliable nature of vision. Othello calls it perjured woman, because she's lying in his mind. Thou dost stone my heart, and makest me call what I intend to do a murder, which I thought a sacrifice. He's talking about the way in which her refusal to admit to her supposed guilt is stoning his heart. It's hurting him, because it's preventing him from sticking to his convictions in the sacrificial nature of this murder, this sort of morally justifiable way of understanding it. But also, again, it hardens his heart and makes me call what I intend to do a murder. He still intends to do it. That's the important part. So again, there's instability in his own language here. It may seem like a rendition of sensibility, but it also can be read as a renewal of his conviction and of his oath and his commitment to the act that he is about to undertake. But intend to do a murder which I thought a sacrifice. Obviously, here is the justification that he cannot really say that he misunderstands. He has an understanding of it, but he has such conviction in the belief in supposed justice, and this is effectively an honor killing. It's an honor killing of sorts. I saw the handkerchief, and this is the key part of this overall speech here, is that all of this faulty rationale that we see being made, that's transparently explained in these lines, is because of this contingent evidence. The way that we see reality in all of its unreliable, contingent nature can be used, provided people have the right intellectual tools, to justify atrocities. There's a famous Voltaire quote: "If you make me believe absurdities, you can make me commit atrocities," or words to that effect. And that's precisely what Iago has managed to do to Othello here. He found it then, Desdemona says, "I never gave it to him. Send for him hither, let him confess a truth." And again, here, the language that Desdemona used also makes it sound as if, it shows her conviction, because confessing a truth is in legal terminology illogical. You don't confess, true and honest and virtuous ideas. You confess to your lies. So her language here, I think, reveals the conviction that she has in her own honesty and in her own virtue. And Othello says, "He hath confessed." And he's lying here, and this is the important thing here. "What, my lord, that he hath used thee?" he hasn't at any point actually admitted to this. So what we see here is Othello really engaging in what psychologists would call confirmation bias. He's effectively manufacturing evidence that supports his claim. It shows us his willingness, at least, to utilize confirmation bias. He wants to see reality in a certain way, and is actually fabricating ideas here to convince himself, to sort of fortify himself at the moment of her murder. He will not say so, Desdemona says. She's confident. No, his mouth is stopped. Honest Iago have taken order for it, so Iago has arranged for his death. Desdemona says, oh, my fear interprets. What, is he dead? Had all his hairs been lives, my great revenge had stomach for them all. So again, through his language here, through this analogy that he uses between hairs and lives, Othello is saying to Desdemona that had all the hairs on Michael Cassio's head been lives, I would have a strong enough desire and an ability to stomach the murder of every single one of them. His passion, quite clearly, in his own words, is getting the better of him here. The immensity of his desire for vengeance is made transparently clear in these lines. And Desdemona simply says, alas, he is betrayed and I undone. And again, she's being completely virtuous and honest, but Othello misreads the cues. Out, strumpet! Weepst thou for him to my face? The conflict between their visions of reality is so evident here, is that she is the one that is concerned with abstract sense of moral virtue and justice at this moment in time. He thinks he is, and misreads her lament for the unreliable nature of what is occurring as a personal sense of attachment for Michael Cassio. And that, again, further drives him in his quest for justice, as we put maybe in speech marks, or his murderous intent. Desdemona begins here these kind of these protestations for Othello to save her life. Oh, banish me, my lord, but kill me not. He just says, down, strumpet. From here, Othello is extremely relentless and denies Desdemona the opportunity for salvation. And this is something that I think, again, feeds into the portrait of his murderous desire for revenge and the way that his passion has entirely got control of him. We see that further over on the page on 122. She says, kill me tomorrow, let me live tonight. Nay, if you strive, but half an hour. She keeps reducing the terms. Let me live, send me away, or kill me tomorrow, give me half an hour. And she just keeps reducing the terms and he keeps refusing. Being done, there is no pause, which is despite, his earlier protestations, which we see here. Desdemona says, okay, well, while I say one prayer, and he says it's too late. So he denies her the opportunity for repentance here. He kills her before she has the opportunity to repent of the sins, which he has himself demanded that she carry out. So there's a real, I think, in the sequence of events, there's a really clear picture of the intensity of Othello's murderous passion. And Desdemona quickly proclaims, oh, Lord, Lord, and he smothers her, in this murder that refuses to taint the actual flesh of her body with blood. Emilia says, my lord, she's outside now and is arriving. What, ho, my lord, my lord! And I think that this constant repetition that you see as Desdemona dies and Emilia enters the scene effectively, not actually physically, but in terms of our participation, shows us this sort of godlike role that Othello is adopting, and I think, is a form of hubris. It's a form of one of those kind of flaws in tragic heroes, is that inflated sense of pride before a fall. I mean, usually, conventionally, it would come before this particular moment in the play, but there is something godlike about the way in which Othello wields justice. Othello goes quite insane temporarily, not quite to the level that he does earlier on in the play when he's in this kind of paroxysm, this sort of stunned paroxysm of mesmerized anger earlier on in the play when Iago sort of titillates him with all the sexual suggestions about Cassio and Desdemona. And Othello says, what noise is this? Not dead? Not yet quite dead? I that am cruel am yet merciful. I would not have thee linger in pain. He's talking to Desdemona as he's killing her. He's effectively having a quiet conversation with her as she makes noises that are the consequence of her being strangled and smothered. And yet again, he uses these abstractions. I am cruel and am yet merciful. So he, in his head, is capable of being cruel and merciful at the same time, because he's now not going to allow her to linger in pain. So again, his misguided grasp of abstractions, particularly of moral and ethical abstractions here, provides the rational underpinning for his murder. Emilia, with that, well, oh, my lord, who's there? Oh, good, my lord, I'll speak a word with you. And again, here, there's a really bizarre, this speech is extremely bizarre, where he appears to be addressing Desdemona, but, in the state that he assumes she's dead at this moment in time, although as we find out shortly that she's not quite yet gone. He says, yes, 'tis Emilia, by and by, nearby, she's dead. 'Tis like she comes to speak of Cassio's death. The noise was high. Ha! No more moving, still as the grave. Shall she come in? Were it good? I think she stirs again. No, what's best to do? If she come in, she'll sure speak to my wife. My wife? My wife? What wife? I have no wife. Oh, insupportable. Oh, heavy hour, methinks there should be now a huge eclipse of sun and moon, and that the affrighted globe should yawn at alteration. This is the linguistic cues in this are of a mind degenerating here. He's checking initially in these questions to see whether she's still alive, but then he slips into asking questions here almost as if he's speaking to Desdemona. Well, shall I let Emilia in? Were it good? Is it a good idea to do so? I think these broken thoughts and questions show us that sense of his mental uncertainty and the hysteria of his mental state, and that the attempt to overcome his emotion with resolve. And this is the great tragedy, is that he actually is able to do this. His resolve is quite powerful at this moment, but he has not been able to use it to overcome the highly emotive jealousy that has driven him to this moment. He says further that the word wife, when he gets to it, what's best to do? If she come in, sure she'll speak to my wife. And then this word, I think, functions almost like a pivot in this speech for the state of his mind, because it is the pivot around which his sanity and his insanity seems to turn. He here illogically says that Emilia will speak to his wife, sort of half imagining her still to be alive. And then that's what leads him into these exclamations, because he has an epiphany, realizing that he's killed her. What wife? I have no wife. Oh, insupportable, oh, heavy hour. And he sees Desdemona's mortality in these final lines, her dying, as one of cosmic kind of repugnance, that the universe now, has shifted from the chaste stars being looking so scornfully on Desdemona's shame, to now the universe being thrown out of joint, effectively. There should now be a huge eclipse of sun and moon. And that the affrighted globe should yawn at alteration. That yawning here, the yawning of the globe, is supposed to be some form of earthquake here. So we've got this cosmic repugnance at his act. And I think this comes back to that idea about the harmony of the spheres being broken. We associate the harmony of the spheres and the divine right of kings and that very rigid order and the abstractions like nobility and duty and integrity and honesty that we use to underpin it, being shaken to the foundations by Machiavellian humanism. And here we have another reference to a metaphor, a cosmic metaphor that I think feeds back into that particular cultural idea. Emilia says, I do beseech you that I may speak to you, good, oh good my lord. And he carries on as normal. Emilia comes in though and mistakenly tells Iago that Rodrigo's been murdered. And Othello obviously listens to this, thinking that it's actually Cassio that's going to be killed, because that's his understanding of the plotting that he's carried out with Iago, that he will kill Cassio. Says Rodrigo killed and Cassio killed. No, Cassio is not killed. Not Cassio killed. Then murder's out of tune and sweet revenge grows harsh. And now, here again, murder's out of tune. Well, of course, Othello, murder is out of tune. Murder is morally reprehensible, really, at any moment in time. And that it's one of the most serious sins. So, of course, the way in which what this portrays to us is the way that he sees a sense of justice and harmony in his vengeful actions. We go back to the idea of the harmony of the spheres and the order of the spheres. Murder is always out of tune, and sweet revenge grows harsh. The sweet revenge really is an oxymoron. Revenge is really never a sweet moment. It's usually a a moment in which you are drawn into a morally reprehensible position by someone outside of yourself. And it grows harsh. Again, it's discordant language that is used to echo this particular idea.